Welcome to the new Rainmaker podcast, a weekly show for visionary founders and team members alike to come together and share the heartfelt, the cringe, and the radically honest truths about what it's really like to build and work for some of the world's most exposed brands on the biggest internet stages. I'm your host, Veronica Romney, and after working for some of the biggest names in the online space myself, I've learned that it takes both leadership and dream team collaboration to truly scale a company to its greatest potential. You can build a business alone, but you cannot scale it on your own. And my goal on today's episode and every episode is to inspire our dreamers and empower our leaders. Make sure to follow and share my podcast with your friends and colleagues, and feel free to tag me on Instagram at vromney with your insights and ahas. Now let's make it rain on today's episode. Hey, welcome to the Rainmaker podcast. I'm super excited to have my very new friend. We just became friends this year, and I coerced her to be on a podcast to reveal all her secrets. So I'm going to introduce the Rainmaker community to Ms. Dana Malstaff, who is with us today, the OG boss mom. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I felt really old for a long time because I did not know what OG meant. I was like, I am not cool enough to know. And I generally tell people that I am terrible at keeping secrets, especially my own. So
Perfect, because I'm gonna take all of them for you. Okay. I would love for you, for anybody who's kind of been living under a rock, I would love for you to introduce yourself, because you've also gone through by the way, your evolution is what we'll talk about today. The evolution of your entrepreneurial journey with your motherhood, with your management of people. So why don't you give us a brief overview of what you're all about?
Yeah. So I am the founder and CEO of Boss Mom LLC. I like to put the LLC because there's a lot of other boss mommy things, but we're the official boss mom. And ultimately, it's funny because when we start businesses, we want to say, I help so and so, right? So ultimately, I help moms grow online businesses with sales and marketing so that they can choose how they want to spend the time with their family. But the actual mission of Boss Mom is a deep-seated belief that women have massive identity crisis, massive stress, massive self-sabotage, massive all of these things, and we constantly wake up wondering if we're valuable, if we're loved, if we're seen, if we're necessary, right? That we are simply somebody that is put on earth in order to facilitate other people succeeding, like our children and our families and all of those things. And Boss Mom was created for those women to know that they are seen, heard, loved, and valued, and to create ways in their life where they feel like they begin to have choice freedom so that they can move into a place of self-care, self-love, and that emanates out into their children. So our saying is that you should not sacrifice your life for your children. It is meant that you show your children what a good life lived looks like. And that's what Boss Mom is all about. My area of expertise happens to be in messaging and positioning. And so that's where we help them most. That's where I'm able to help most from a business growth standpoint. But the mission of Boss Mom is much more deep-seated in, I think, something that I saw women and especially moms needed, and have spent the last 7 years trying to help as many moms as possible feel valuable.
Yeah, and this is where you and I really connected very quickly. So we met in person in Austin through a mutual friend, Jill Stanton, who did a mixer in Austin. And that's where I met you for the first time. And I had expressed, I think I shared with you, 2022 was a year where I invested in a parenting coach because, of all the pursuits, entrepreneurship, wifehood, parenthood, I would rank being a mom as the hardest endeavor that I have ever undertaken in my life and will ever do, I'm sure, because the responsibility of caring for little humans is daunting. And most of the time, I'm like, what the freak am I doing? And that's where you and I connected very quickly, because my outlook on parenting, how I view it and how you view it as high achieving women, was really refreshing to hear your perspective as opposed to what's out there. And so I just want to start with that's where you and I bonded very, very quickly outside of our shared values, which include integrity, honesty, and being very frank. So we're going to be very frank on today's podcast. Now, I admire what you've achieved. I mean, your podcast is millions of downloads. You have a Facebook group over 70,000. You've amassed quite an exposed brand yourself. But correct me if I'm wrong. What was day zero? You bootstrapped this from bottom up, didn't you?
Totally. Well, and I tell people too that Boss Mom was not the first thing I came up with when I quit my job And then the last day of my job, and this is what I tell people too, is I didn't quit my job. The husband and wife were getting a divorce.
Mhm.
And so all the people he had hired was basically kind of systematically getting fired. So I knew I was within months I was going to get fired. So I proactively, literally, like, was the scariest thing I've ever done, went to the person that was kind of taking over things and sat down and said, I see what's happening. How can we make this work for both of us? Him and I actually are still friends because he was like very impressed with my ability to go and say, like, I know what's happening. So, but when I left, everybody took me. I was going to start my own business as a consultant doing God knows what, right? And everybody took me out and got tequila shots, and 6 weeks
Nice.
later I found out I was pregnant. And we'd been trying to have kids and we couldn't because I was working 14-hour
Mhm.
days as a director level, like all that kind of stuff. So I joke that I became a boss mom in the same time. But there's two other. I had a business called Perspective Cubed. By the way, never have a business that people can't spell. It was terrible. But it was all about leadership communication. So I'd go into like the Red Cross and I'd do half-day retreats and things like that. I have no idea how I got any of those things. They were all from like connections I had or something. It's all fuzzy now because I was pregnant the whole time.
Hey, man.
Yeah, so Boss Mom wasn't born until until my son was 2. I had been trying to get things going, figuring out what it was I wanted to do, and paying a bunch of people to have things like not work because I didn't know. It's like hard to find. You can hire really, really smart people, but if you are confused about what direction you are, if you're not the beacon of light and then you're wishy-washy,
Mhm.
then really great advice just doesn't work on anybody.
Mm.
It just falls flat. And so I was unsuccessful for several years. Then I actually was hosting a Live Your Legend meetup, right? And I had met a friend there. It was across the street from where I was living in La Jolla at the time. And one of the girls there had bought a ticket to Hal Elrod's event, and she had a free ticket. And so she brought me with her. And I remember I'd never heard of Hal. I never read his stuff. I'm friends with him now. He's amazing. But I remember like getting his book because he was giving him out to everybody. And I just remember going up to him and being like, well, you don't know me, but I'm going to be on your stage at some point because what you're talking about really speaks to the things I care about. And he's like, ha ha ha. Well, 3 years later, I was on his stage. Him and I are friends. So like, yeah, I was like, yes, I'm one of those people like with social media marketing world where I was like, I refuse to buy a ticket. They're going to invite me. I've
Oof.
now spoken on stage 4 years in a row. And then I emceed at the last one. And because, yeah, I'm like, why do it? Why do it small when you can why pay for things when you could just have people invite you, right? Same thing. I'm going to get a PhD someday, but it's just going to be honorary. I just want someone to give it to me.
Like Taylor Swift, just show up for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't until at that event I met several people. One of them who was Azul Toronis, who writes books, helps people write books.
Mhm.
And we started a little mastermind together. And he basically said, hey, if anybody wants to write a book, I'll give you this amazing discount. Of course, everybody and that in my family and everybody was like, it's a terrible idea. It's a bad use of money. It's a bad focus. And when we sat down, I thought I was going to write a book called Expand Your Reach, which is what I had changed my business name to. And it was going to be all about marketing and, which of course I only knew a finite bit about. I had no business writing a book about it at the time because we're talking like 8 years ago. And what came out of it was all of the mom stuff,
Mm.
all of the mom guilt, all of my desire to be a high achieving person. I was at the time, like I had left being a multi 6-figure earner, right? Like leaving that to make absolutely nothing while having a baby and finding in like really intense feelings about the fact that I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom, but I wanted to be a present mom,
Mhm.
right? That I didn't want my life to be my kids. I wanted to have things that were my own things and build things. And I knew all the things I was capable of, but also wanting to be there with my kids. Like there was a lot of just grappling with it. And that all came out in the book. And it ended up, Boss Mom was not the name that I thought we would have. We actually brainstormed a bunch of things,
Mhm.
and that's the one that everybody liked. And so I just listened to the audience. I didn't even like it very much, and then we went with it. And the book, so the book was the first thing, but the
Mhm.
book was, I tell everybody, like, man, it's a walkabout. Like if you're trying to figure your stuff out, sometimes getting it out in a book or getting it out in a course or getting it out in something that, or an instruction manual
Yeah.
or whatever it is you want to do, your onboarding for your clients, like it helps you figure out what the heck you care about. And from there, that's when we started the podcast and started the Facebook group and did all of those things, because I started to realize, oh, this is something I really care about. I want to start a movement around this. And from there, then my natural abilities to help people in content creation and sales and marketing and all of those things that I knew from corporate, those started to come out as what the questions were. And then I started selling small things and then eventually moved into bigger things. And then now I'm much, 7 years later, we're much more honed into exactly how I'm helpful, how we've scaled that, how we do that, how, all that kind of stuff. But I call it a big walkabout because
Mhm.
honestly, we're constantly in the wilderness. And then, the moment you level up your business, it's a whole new
Oh,
wilderness.
yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, and, every time you get into a new arena, a big arena, the bigger the challenges, the fiercer the competitors, you know? My entrepreneurial story is similar to yours in the sense that I was doing side hustles and side things when I was still working my corporate job. Like I had like a bulk candy website and a couple of different e-commerce stuff, that just would pay for fun money for us.
Yeah.
And then I was on my maternity leave when my husband came home. I was like, I'm very unhappy with my job. Let's move. Let's start our own thing. I'm like, excuse me. So I had my son in February and we started the marketing agency in July, 7/11. That's how I remember it because it was Slurpee Day. So that's wild. I'll tell you what, going from being a boss at a corporate arena, making well over multiple six figures, just to your point, like really, I mean, especially as a female, you're one of the few. There was a statistic I remember that the director of HR told me when I got pregnant that she's like, I know you're coming back because you make more than 50,000. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? So if a woman made less than $50,000 in a corporation and got pregnant, the likelihood of her returning was like slim to none. But women that made more money would more likely come back. And I came back after like 8 weeks, which was also insane. But what's crazy is I thought I was a really good leader. Like I would like to think that I was still a great leader before motherhood, but my leadership abilities and compassion and empathy, now leading other people as a mother and having that skill set was a game changer for me. I don't know if you can speak to that, but like I almost want to have a conversation around like being a good mom equals being a good leader and like that transferable skill from one to the other. But I'm curious your perspective on that.
Well, I think it depends on how you look at motherhood. I think the way you would naturally lead probably lends itself to the way you would naturally mother because there's some people that are more yelly,
Mm,
more anger, more what, versus patience. And so I think curiosity is a big component of leadership. And one of the things I learned way back in from somebody in corporate, but just, is that concept of a positive intent, right? Which is we often look at the world as being done to us.
mm,
And a lot of times we look at parenting as being done to us. While my child is crying, that's being done to me. It's friction in my day, right? Versus positive intent, which is your child needs something. They don't know how to communicate. They don't mean to be a total jerk face that day. They're an emotional hot mess, right? Because they have no idea how to manage their emotions. You start to realize that their adults are that way. There's a lot of
mhm,
adults that don't know how to manage their emotions. They don't, there's a lot of things times where we're just bumping into each other and we don't mean to. So I think people that come at parenting not as if it's happening to them, but they recognize there's this tiny being that is freaking lost as all hell. They have no idea what's going on. They need to feel like they have a home base with you, whatever that means. And it teaches you, man, patience is one of the biggest things. And I'm divorced, right? And so into my parenting, kids are 7 and 9, and so still have a long way to go. But my I call him my former husband. I don't know why ex-husband seems weird to me. My former husband, he has a lovely girlfriend
mhm,
and they've been together for several years. And I tried to describe to somebody that I have had two babies like without any, without any painkiller. Like I've done I've been hit by a car. Like I've done all sorts of it's just I feel like there's a lot I've had in my life. I've had my dad pass away,
mhm,
like wither it, like I've just had all
mhm,
these things. But having your 7-year-old daughter explain to you the wonderful things that her and another woman who it may end up being her stepmother some way are doing and how great she is, and literally have to smile, which not most people wouldn't. Like I do think there's a component of leadership to the fact of me smiling and telling her like that's lovely, I'm so glad that you had a really nice time with her, like that sounds like really fun, when all I want to do is look at her and go, I am your mother, nobody else should be your mother but me, like nobody else should get to do those things with you but me, and all I want to do is scream out loud that like I should be the only one. but recognizing that this moment for her has nothing to do with me, and it doesn't detract from her love of me. It doesn't detract from, her caring. It doesn't detract from anything. In fact, me making it about me detracts from her experience and her understanding of the fact that you can love multiple people, and that it doesn't detract from love from each other. I think leadership is that recognition of going, there's what I want needs to be put aside for a moment, and I need to recognize that there are other human beings that need to be lifted up, or need to be talked to, or need to be understood, or need to be heard, or even need to be disciplined, but in a way that is still respectful. Right? It doesn't matter how I feel. Like, leadership to me is recognizing when you take your feelings, put them over to the side, and give a little grace to what's happening. And man, parenting, you're right. Like, that experience is just something that happened recently that is like, it took all of my cunning to be graceful in that situation so that my daughter wouldn't feel bad about telling me those things. Because I don't want to be in a situation where my daughter or an employee or a colleague or a client is scared to tell me something because of my reaction. Like, that's the worst thing in leadership, is when people don't communicate with you
Yep.
because they don't think you can take it.
Oof. Yeah, hands down. And I will say my leadership skills has paralleled the aging of my children, right? Because when your kids are little, they don't have the skills to communicate, not even with words. Like there's no, right? There's not even the tactical skill of like language. So you learn their body language, you learn their size, you learn all of those verbal cues, all of that nonverbal communication, right? Which oftentimes when you're working with your staff, your team, they'll tell you everything's fine or they're fine, but you know full well by their body language and how they're showing up in their demeanor that they're not
Yeah.
fine. And then, right, as your children get older and learn that language and learn that skill, you realize that there's layers to things that are being said, but same thing with adults, same thing. I'm not demeaning my adult staff by relating them or comparing them to children. I'm actually really communicating about my evolution as a human being, that as I have learned the different degrees of motherhood for myself, it has made me a better leader because I've gained skill upon skill upon skill with the evolution of my children aging,
Yes, that's
right?
totally true.
Yeah, I never even really thought about it until I just got on the podcast with you. Like, really, like, wow, how much I have changed. The leader that I am today because my children are 6 and 8 versus the leader or the manager that I was to employees when my children were first born are drastically different. Obviously, I'm older as well. But even to this day, when I'm training my Rainmakers in my program, I call us mother hens. Like, we are a mother hen to our chicks. Like, that is the responsibility of a leader within the organization. And it takes the burden off the CEO to have more mother hens around them so they can care for all of the chicks as they expand their company. Now, you did bootstrap your company from ground up. And so, like, the startup CEO usually builds teams from bottom up as opposed to being a funded organization where you then get funding to bring in the leaders first and the leaders recruit underneath them, right? So, with as best of your memory, I would love to talk about your team evolution, like where you started. Because I was even on like your About Us page on your website today and I saw the people around you today, but I know that's not where you started.
Yeah.
So talk to me about baby you entrepreneur, and how you started having more chicks in your life as well to manage.
Yeah. Okay. So the very first hire that was just, part time, maybe like 5 hours a week or so, was somebody to pitch me on podcasts. So the very first person I hired was, all she did was went and got me on 2 podcasts a week for the first year. Right now, I'm at the point where we really like pitch me to larger podcasts kind of on a much less basis. Now I just get invited places. It's much, obviously, there's things in your business where you're like, oh, I don't need that anymore. It's like you automate things, and it's like getting robots to do things because you don't need those things anymore. But that was the very first one. From there, I did what I think everybody does, which is you hire somebody to post on social media. And like for me, I had the Boss Moms group. So it was like, be the community manager. And those things did not work. And now when people are in our Nurture Convert Society program, I tell them, like, don't try and hire like, we have certified VAs for our program, but it's like, don't try and hire somebody to be able to be the voice of your brand. You have to be the voice of your brand. I was like, so you've got to do that. Like, this is part of your market research, your journey. You're figuring it out. Like, you will become so clear in what you're doing. If you're going to put effort into it, do put effort into that. because that is the key. And you know what, when people hear you and they go along in this space and this journey with you, I'd rather it be messy, but it feels real, it feels authentic, it feels you, and they get your opinions and and we help everybody map out their opinions and stuff. But I'm like, yeah, like let you out, because you may not even know the parts of you that you need out. I was like, so don't hire somebody, because no, they're never going to be able to do it well. Even if you gave them all of the right resources, they're never going to be able to do it well.
Oh my gosh, I'm like chomping at the bit. Can you tell? Like, I know people are listening to me, but I'm like, oh, yes. Okay, I have to say something. So, in speaker training, they teach us to put the camera not on us on stage, walking across the stage and the pace of walking. Like, that's fine. But really, you're better
Mhm.
served when the camera that's recording the performance is actually on the audience to see the response of the audience to what you're saying. It's exactly what comedians do when they're trying out different bits and different jokes, right? One of the greatest fatalities to me in early entrepreneurship is when you
Yeah.
outsource the proximity to the audience who needs to validate you, your offer, and your messaging. And so I really try to advise people not to run to outsource their social media or their sales because you haven't proved product market fit or messaging fit yet. And the more distance you put between you and the people validating what you have to say, the more danger that you have of being just like everyone else and just adding to noise and not finding and like planting your flag.
Yes.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Yes. Not only that, but if you do that, if you go and you say, okay, well, then the social media, the sales, the parts that are really about visibility and conversion are mine, then what are the other things I do during the day that I would need to outsource, that I would need to go to, right? So, one of the other things that I did that I felt like was a mistake for me is I thought, well, you know what? I've got so much going on. So, I should have a project manager, which I don't think is the right role. Actually, I have some beliefs about just the way project managers like their brain works, because a lot of times project managers, they believe they give value by creating complex projects, right? Which is really it's like, dude, I pay you for half the time for you to change all the dates I missed because I didn't do any of those 18 things. And I was like, and I realize you have conditions and automations and stuff, but man, like I don't have enough team to like do all of these things.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
gosh, couldn't this all be simpler? Like, do we need 47 things? So now we have a way we teach project management just for our society members that we implement, which says you are not allowed to have a project that is more than 15 tasks. It's Scrum style. And that means if you have a project that is more than 15 tasks, then you have to have phases. And phase one is 15 tasks and phase two, because I
Mhm,
can't go
mhm.
through life, especially as a mom with a million things going on, waiting 3 months to feel like I've done something. Like I need to have every week or two. That's why Scrum kind of style, ours is like a form of it, but it works because you can feel the progress, but also your brain, once it sees too many things, it just starts shutting stuff down. So I made the mistake of trying to get project managers, right? Which it would have been smarter to have somebody like a Rainmaker who could actually make strategic decisions for me, as opposed to
Yes.
put tasks in, but then never help me implement anything. So I highly recommend that people do not hire a project manager when they're still the only one really implementing the stuff, because then you just pay somebody to remind you that you're behind.
Uh, spot on. So here's another tip that I have learned in managing marketing teams, because managing a marketing centric team is very different than managing an operations or customer centric team or company centric team. You're working with marketing creatives who are extremely gifted, but they also have the curse of the genius. So they have ADHD, ADD, they're highly sensitive, they're empaths. Like, again, these are all attributes that I actually love, but when you're managing personalities with these geniuses, it comes with the gift and the curse, and they'll be the first ones to tell you. So I remember when we would do like our launch projects inside of Asana, and it would be massive because a launch has hundreds of tasks, especially if the launch is long or complex or new and we've never done a Facebook challenge before. So one of the things that we started to do was we would create projects just for the vendors or the doers, and they would just see their view of their task and not have access to the entirety of the launch project because it would be so overwhelming to
Yeah.
them. So it would be so overwhelming to them that it would actually deflate them and zap away all of their creativity because they couldn't not see it. They couldn't see what was coming. And so, like you said, in phases, but they only get to see the task in that
Hmm.
phase at a time, as opposed to seeing the 200 that they'll have by the end of this sprint.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And people shut down. And then what you find with team members is, so like when we like a VA kind of certification for our system so that our members hire the VAs that know our system. And when we tell people is that there are three ways that you just stop communicating, right? So number one is you didn't get all the information you needed, but you're scared to ask for the right information because you feel like you should have gotten it all, or you told them you had everything you needed, but now you realize you don't. You're scared. You don't have the confidence to go back and ask for it, right? You run into a decision you don't know how to make, but then you get nervous about ask because you feel like you should, in your position, you should be smart enough to know the answer to that thing. So then you just sit on it. And so you just stop communicating, right? Or the third one is that your life became overwhelming. Like something in your life has happened and kids got sick or something got sick and now you can't hit a deadline. And so what I often find with teams is everybody gets ghosted, right? You like even in your own team, people will like drop away. The communication have like so there's this break in communication, and so it's training your team to go. Look, I would much rather you tell me something happened, you can't get to it, and we can figure it out what needs to be done or not, versus you not communicating. Like if you didn't get enough information, then just ask me, even if you thought you had enough information. Like, and if you can't make a decision, for the love of all that's holy, just tell me what you're undecided about. I was like, because you can't stay on the team if we don't communicate. Like, that's the number one. But it took me years to get there because I would just say, well, maybe I'm a bad manager. Maybe I'm not, doing things the right way. Maybe I'm not, and that it may have been that I wasn't giving them enough information or I didn't know the answer or whatever that was.
Yeah.
But we have to recognize that people look up to us as the one who knows. We have to naturally know that until they've been on our team long enough to know how to act, they're generally nervous about how they act.
Yep.
And therefore,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like I had a ton of people that ended up not staying on my team over the first few years because the communication was bad, right? And part of that
Yep.
was because I didn't understand why, like what they needed, and I didn't understand how to get it to them. And so I didn't know I was a good motivational leader, but not a good operational leader, I think. And that has definitely come over time to be really clear. And I can tell immediately, like, okay, what's going on? I can see a pull. I can see there's a pull. What's happening? Let's bring it
Yeah.
back to center. And
Yeah.
that has
You're reading the room, you're
yes.
reading their body language. We'll be back with this interview right after the commercial break. Did you know that I have a free Rainmaker hiring kit? Skip the formal recruiting process and learn how to source Rainmaker applicants that are already connected to you. I'll show you how to turn a walking testimonial into a rockstar team member for free. Head to veronicarami.com or click the link in my show notes to get your hands on the free Rainmaker hiring kit. Now let's get back to the show. Let me add a layer to that because this is what I see in my observation with working with so many different CEOs who are more that Walt Disney personality, the more that motivational leader than the operational leader. They start to load that side of them, but it's like it's a requirement to get to a certain point in
Mm-hmm.
success and scaling your business. You kind of have to like confront the thing that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
But I would say, in addition to not articulating something or not communicating better or not providing a doer or somebody on the team with what they need, I think what's also lacking is defining success. Because I think a lot of CEOs have a particular vision for what completion is or what success looks like, but they don't articulate the criteria or they're forming that opinion as it's moving, as the plane is flying, the success is being defined as it's going. But then we forget to pause in our flight and let it glide for a hot second to then articulate to the people that are building the plane as we're flying it what success is and what it looks like and what it should look like. Because what ends up happening with you not communicating your success criteria is that your people will start to feel like an imposter, like they're the ones that should know better, and it's really not them. It's not a lack of skill on their part. It's you not defining what success means to you.
Yeah. I also think it helps for us to all be very clear about what roles are and capabilities are. Cause I see so many people that they hire a VA and then they start asking them to set the strategy. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like you're paying them $20, $30 an hour. Like
Mm-hmm.
they don't know the
Mm-hmm.
strategy. And if you let them set the strategy, then that's a terrible idea. Like that's not the right role for that. The other thing too, I think is really important that I've gotten way better about that has taken some like life coaching, some human
Sure.
design, some like all that kind of stuff is to be really clear with my team about my shortcomings, like what I'm good at,
Yeah.
what my style is, right? Like I will tell people, I'll be like, in my mind, what we just agreed I'm going to do is going to take 15 minutes. But I've been doing this long enough to know that it's actually going to take me 3 hours. So I just told you 6 things I'm going to do. Um, that I'm not going to be able to do those 6 things. So I've tried to be really honest about like how my brain works and what I do or where I get distracted. So my current, we call her director of connections, or my girl Friday. She's basically like my right hand person, and that's more operationally style. So not marketing, but she's the one that just makes sure that my business runs for the most part, right? But she knows, so because I'll get into things, I'll get in the thick of things and planning, and my brain is in all these different places, and I will say, we're going to do all these. It's okay. I'm going to do this tomorrow. We're going to do this, whatever. And she'll go, Dana, we both know one of those things is going to happen. There's no way all of those things. And so she's brave enough now that she's been with me for 3 years to go, okay, I know what you would tell me. You'd say, Dana, stop me. Tell me which one of these things is going to happen. And then let's find time in the calendar at a more reasonable date where those other things are going to
Yeah.
happen, because now you're just going to feel behind and feel bad. And then you're going to say you'll stay up or do something or do that tomorrow, but you don't have time. So she's gotten really good because I've conditioned her to be like, I sound like good leaders. I can sound like anything is 100% confidently the right way to go. Like I'm very believable. My team thinks whatever I say is whatever I say.
Yeah.
Like I've had to
Yeah.
condition parts of my team to be like, just because I said that doesn't mean you shouldn't question it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't question the
Mhm.
timing. Just like come back to me and tell me like what you're thinking or where your concerns are, because half the time I'll be like, oh, I just made that date up. Like, yeah, if we needed to move it a week, we could, or no, there's a reason. Like I tell everybody, we got to find things we're willing to fight for. But yeah, when you
Yeah.
sound authoritative, when you sound like, and you're in the leader seat, we have to be careful because our team takes everything we say as like solid, like it is what it
Yep.
is. And
Yep.
then half the time you're like, no, 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 that was, I wanted everybody's opinion. This is up in the air.
Yeah, I remember once, I can't, oh gosh, I'm gonna maybe botch this, but I remember working with Danielle when I was the chief of staff at Boss Babe. And one of the things that Danielle would tell me about Natalie is that Natalie, what is she? Oh gosh, she said it so perfectly, but she was like loosely held strong opinions. It's like such a juxtaposition of a statement where it's like, are you trying to be oxymoronic? But it's like, it's as a visionary, literally most of the time when we're speaking, it comes off extremely like well thought out. Like I've been thinking about this forever and I have a really strong opinion and this is where I'm planting this opinion and this. And I just think that is just the nature of our personalities. I have learned at this point, even in my own leadership or when giving counsel or advice, even I was just at a mastermind group last week and we're doing hot seats. And I have learned, I literally will say this at the beginning when I'm like, hey, I'm going to give you feedback, but let me just start by saying that when I offer, it will come with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of passion because that's just how I speak. I could easily play devil's advocate with myself and contradict myself and take the alternative perspective. So like my feelings won't be hurt if you don't take what I have to say. Just know that just because it's going to come off really strong. So I have learned to like put that Surgeon General warning, and I do it certainly with my team. But I want to ask you a question about your person who has, like you said, after 3 years, they have the confidence to say, are you really going to do that? Because I remember in my podcast with Haley Burkhead, she was talking about the same thing with her person. She trusts her person unconditionally so that when her person, she like pushes back, Haley doesn't take it as a form of disrespect or
Mm-hmm.
condescension in any way. That doesn't happen right away. That takes time. So, how did you get there? And that's the advice I want you to give to other CEOs because when it first starts to happen, it rubs them wrong. And yet they all tell me they want somebody around them that's not a yes person. So, how do you go from the beginning to having to feeling comfortable that somebody's going to call you out in a loving way?
Okay. So there's a couple things. Number one, I learned several years in, I have everybody take the 16 personalities test before they're on the team because I need to know who I want. So for instance, I don't put somebody that's my right hand person from an operations standpoint that has the kind of personality where I know they want to be me, right? Where they want to be the CEO. What I want is I want somebody who finds joy in being part of a team, but doesn't want necessarily the limelight, like those kinds of things, because it is harder to take. I think it's harder, one, to build up that relationship knowing that every 2 years that person's going to leave because they're going to grow and grow out of you. They're sales roles, there are totally other roles where you want them to leave. Like my dad said, the worst employee is the one that stays. Either they're moving up or moving out, right? He's like, if they're staying and they're staying stagnant, he's like, that is never a good sign. And so I always take that. Like there are certain roles in your organization where there's like a 2 year turnaround and you know it. And that's good because you want the best of the best that doesn't know how great they are. You're going to help them become as great as they can. They're going to move on and remember how, how you were helped them get their start. But from the operations side, I wanted somebody who like finds deep seated joy in being a part of something, and that's important to them. So Nicole is that kind of person. So knowing that I want to not feel upset when she's telling me things, and knowing that I need to build up her confidence, what I told her is I gave her the words to say, you know what you would tell me. And so that basically gave her the ability to arm her with any time she was going to say something, but she was nervous to say it. She'd say, okay, Dan, I know what you would tell me. And you would tell me that I need to challenge you on this. Like, Dan, I know that you would, like, I know what you tell me, and you would tell me that's too many things on your plate. Like, I know what you would tell me. And this was, so what it does is it makes me feel like I'm the one that gave her the knowledge. So I feel super snazzy and, because I'm the one that gave her permission. So it doesn't hit me in the wrong way. But it also gives her that little tiny layer of it not just being her, and to build that up. Well, now we're 3 years in and she doesn't say that anymore. Now she just tells me because we have a good enough rapport. But in the beginning, it's like having when we were talking about offline a while ago in a different call, but you have that mastermind, but somebody has that little stick that is like, hey, maybe we're off track, or hey, maybe that's not the right
Mhm.
thing. And it gives them this little tiny, like, little stuffy to hold, like this little safety thing. And so I found giving your team members this little safety thing so that they feel just that little net that's under them to bring them in so that they can make comments with, and when they don't know how to do it, because there's a lot of times where if you don't do that, I've had people come in and people that we've not ended well in our relationship, right? That would come in and they would just say, I don't like the way you're doing that. Like, I don't think this is the right way to take your business. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry.
Oof.
Let me stop for a moment and think about what my role in the business is and what your role in the business is, and wait, you don't think, you know what I mean? And you immediately go there because the words are wrong. But when
Yeah.
Nicole comes in and
Defense.
she's like, I know what you would say, Dana, and you would say that it's a bad time to launch this thing. You've got too many things on your plate. And she's like, that I know you've done this 3 times before, and you know what you would say to me. And I'd be like, oh, darn it, you're so right. Thank you for bringing that up for me because I'm too in it to see that. But it gives
Mm.
that space. But yeah, when they don't know the right words, people who don't have like insane amounts of communication training, because it is a skill, like
Yeah.
a lifelong skill,
Yes.
they will
Yeah.
tend to say things that definitely are an affront to our, like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is my company. This is not. I've actually
Mm.
had an employee that would start to referring to things as we, and I was like, oh, hold up there, Tiger. Been here for 6 months, Tiger. I don't know that we is the
Yeah.
right
Slow down
word
there.
for us to use. Which is funny because in all of my marketing, I use we. I love we. We is great. But when somebody, you don't feel like there's been an earning of that,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
can jump way too quick into thinking you guys are buying curtains together.
Yeah. There's not enough relationship
Mm-hmm.
equity yet. And so the fact that you've armed, a person like Nicole, by the way, can I just stop and give you some words of affirmation? Because that's my love language. That was one of the most insane, bomb, gold advice on this podcast to date. Period. I already like marked it on my piece of paper, like awesome quote 35 minutes in. Like, because I'm such a marketer at all times. But the fact that you gave her permission to basically take on a mirror of you. So it's you against you, but she's just holding the mirror for you. So, like, so genius. I talk about this a lot inside my program as well, like using common language, because going back to how we were raised, the same words don't mean the same things to people.
Totally.
How one family or one family of origin or one tribe used a particular phrase or word can be drastically different in meaning as somebody else. And I know that we're all grown adults and that should equal the playing field, but it does not, especially when it comes to miscommunication. And so one of the things that you try to do in going into a new team or forming new leadership groups is almost giving them new language to use, whether that's like green card, yellow card, red card, or like different things. I've used a ton of different
Mm-hmm.
ones, but the fact that you gave her language to emulate you being the adversarial or the counterpoint to yourself, gold, absolute genius, gold. because that I think that's what's so deflating sometimes, especially if you interact or surround yourself with stronger personality leaders. I think the misconception, I certainly have felt this way. I mean, I'm an Enneagram 8, I'm a strong Cuban female. And so sometimes I feel like they loved me at first and then they didn't love me after a while. It's like they loved the idea of me when they hired me, someone that was super strong, that can take the team, da da da. And then somewhere along the lines, I felt like they didn't love me as much because I was saying hard things. And so I've had to learn by myself how to better deliver harder things to say, as opposed to having my leader give me language like, this is the cheat sheet to talk to me and push back on me. Can I tell you how refreshing that would have been? Because I've learned it all through tears and getting it wrong. So the fact that you armed your person with that type of language that works for you is such an invitation for anybody listening to this podcast to do the same activity. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I like the words of affirmation. It's my love language too. I mean, the other one's touching, but we can't, we can't hug
I know.
quite yet. So
No, but you did. I remember when I met you, you're so much touching. You're like, I just like to touch people. I'm like, got it. That's so funny. That's what I remember when I met you in Austin. Oh my gosh. Okay, gosh, this is such a good, oh my gosh, I'm like, this is such a good podcast. This is so practical and so helpful. Thank you. Okay, so you told me how you did start your team building. If you could go back to baby Dana, what would you have started with? I'm just curious.
oh, that's a great question. I mean, I do think the thing that helped me, the like getting visible. So I wouldn't change the fact that I had somebody to help me get featured because that was,
Mhm,
just such a
mhm,
great way to build authority. I think really, if I would have been smart about it, I think I would have found somebody either locally or something like that
mm,
that could have sat with me more, right? Like I'm a
mm,
speak to think person. And so like now we do 2 hours on Monday for strategy and 2 hours on Friday for what we call our 10% meeting, which is where we just take anything that's 90% done and try and close out as many things as we can on Friday so that we don't have a bunch of open loops in places. But that sitting time, like I'm a speak to think person. Half the time I say things, I have ideas, but then I don't have anybody to execute them. And I need somebody smart to execute them. In my early days, I couldn't afford to have somebody that was me, and oftentimes what we do when we hire a big agency that just takes things on, it's not your team. It's not, they don't understand your brand. I don't think that's a good idea either, right? Like you really want somebody in house that like gets it, that's family, that like, and I think that is your ideal client. Like you always hire your ideal client that gets your stuff, that is passionate about it, that cares about it. And so I think I would have loved to have somebody that was still young that wanted to like, because I love the mentoring thing. Leaders enjoy mentoring. So it's like you want to hire the person that knows everything, but you also kind of want to hire the person that gets to say you helped them get where they were going. It's just a natural inclination of leaders. So but have somebody that actually like sat next to me and was there with me more, so that I talked a lot, but I didn't implement as much. You know what I mean? There was a lot of ideas and strategy and
mm.
thoughts and things like that, but I didn't implement as much. So I
Yeah,
think that would have been good. Um, and then I think not like just if I would have not ever hired a project manager, right? But I would have found
sure.
something more like what you do, which is more the
Mm,
marketing side, that could be my
mhm.
counterpart, that could have grown with me, could have done those things, because it's really really hard to find somebody who can take your brain and then play with it and then know what to do with
Yes,
it and then over time get better
yes.
and better. Like now Nicole, who does a lot of like the email framing and things like that for me, I look at it and I know. And there's parts of my business I literally don't even have to look at. Like I know she takes care of it and I know she does it well. And every time I look, I'm like, yes, that's
Mm,
exactly spot on.
yeah,
And that's what I would have liked. But it's just really hard in the beginning because you almost wonder if, there has to be some level of clarity you get in what your business is
yeah,
before, like, to bring somebody in like you to be like, let me tell you what you're not clear on and be really honest. Because when you hire coaches, a lot of times the coaches go, oh, you have that idea, well, let's run with it.
yeah,
Like there's not a lot of
yeah.
coaches that tell you that's not a good idea and you shouldn't do that, or don't hire that person, you don't have that, so maybe having somebody like you to say, Like, I think that before you hire this person, you need more clarity in this area,
Yep.
and you don't have an onboarding process. And this person's going to come on and they're going to have no idea how to do this thing. And then you're going to put more work on yourself and all that kind of stuff. Like, because you feel lost, and then you feel like you're the only one that can do the things. And that's an immense amount of burden when you're trying to grow a business.
Yes, and in the really sad stories, people burn it to the ground before they ever figure out that or have that
Yeah.
realization. I will tell you, I literally just you can tell. I mean, we're seeing each other on camera, so I'm like freaking out as opposed to you guys. You can't see us if you're listening to us, but I'm freaking out because I literally had this conversation with my team this week. We have incredible CEO and Rainmaker duos inside the Rainmaker residency, and it's not like I rank them against each other, but I will say that there was an observation that really crystallized for me this week in particular, that some of the best duos or the most successful rainmakers were the ones that came into organizations where the CEO had more clarity around the business they were building.
Hmm.
If a marketing leader came on board when the CEO was in the middle of like completely gutting their business or changing their entire product suite or not 100% sure what direction they wanted to take, it was very difficult for the rainmaker to shine.
Totally.
That has been repeatedly shown to us. Again, and that's not to say that we can't help all be successful, but it's harder because like there's so much ambiguity. And so like if your position is an execution leader and a leader who delegates to more people who can execute, it's very difficult to execute an ambiguous plan.
Hmm.
So that I just have to validate what you're saying because that was a huge thing that we were talking about even as a team this week. The other thing that I cannot tell you enough that I'm also physically freaking out about is I love, and I have always said and will always say that my greatest, longest tenured, retained team members, I'm talking years and years and years that I have track record with managing these people or being and working with these people, is where, and I talk about it on the Rainmaker hiring kit. You can go to the page and you'll see my copy. It's taking a walking testimonial and turning it into an incredible team member.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like they're bought in, and it can be different levels of bought in. They're bought into the vision, they're bought in because they purchase your products, they follow you, like,
Yep.
but they're bought in into what you're doing. And so you're just taking somebody who is like drinking the Kool-Aid, and then you're inviting them to further propel the mission and the vision of what you're doing. And then what you're promising as an exchange is that you're going to be increasing their human capital on your dime and time. It is the most valuable thing that you have to offer somebody who is bought in. And I love working with people, and I'm such a proponent of building up from
Hmm.
within than just sourcing without if you can avoid it. But yes, I totally relate to what you're saying in that way.
Yeah, my
Mm.
two progress coaches, one we're going to be bringing on in January, all members before they were.
Yeah.
Nicole, actually, the reason she came on is she was in the Boss Moms group and she was in the midst of a personal issue. And I had experience with that. And so I just said, let's hop on a Zoom. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. I was like, let's just hop
Mm.
on a Zoom because I had this exact problem. Like, let me tell you what happened. And from there, she then a month later, when she said she was going to get into being a VA because she was working on getting a divorce and wasn't sure, like all that kind of stuff. And that kind of spoke to my heart. And I was like, well, come in and I need help with email, like just these little things that I need help with. And I had an operations director at the time, and we were having a little bit of tug because she wanted to be more strategy, and there's no implementation. No, and I was like, I don't need two of me. I need I need
Yeah.
somebody that complements me. And so we were having a bit of tug, and Nicole came in and was managing my email and just was super gung ho, was like, how can I be of value? How can I be of value? So when my operations director left, she came to me and she's like, I know this just happened. I don't want to be rude, but I want her job. How do I get her job?
Oof.
Right. And it was like, okay, well, then here's the things we need to
Love
do.
it.
Let's inch you in. Let's inch you in. And that was, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Yep.
And now she's my right person. She's,
Yep.
and she's like very dedicated, and it's awesome. But yeah, she grew up in the organization, which is a good way to be.
Yes. Yes. And that doesn't bother me. And again, going back, tying it to the beginning of this podcast, I think the reason that it doesn't bother me because I have kids. I know the benefit, the enormous eternal like joy that I have as a mother to see my child develop from zero to hero. Like,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like from coming out of me and physically and like watching my son try to sell cookies for $20 because there's a toy he wants for $20. I'm like, I think that's above market price. He's like, I'm going to do it. And he like went out to every door, and I'm watching this happen. I'm like, you rock star. Do you know what
Oh,
I mean? But like,
totally.
we didn't start that way. And I honor that because so yes, I think tying it back to the whole point, like being a mother has made me appreciate attributes that I have seen my children form. And so when I see my team members have these proactivities and this like entrepreneurial, like they're not an external entrepreneur, they're entrepreneurial spirit that like I can foster and I can grow and I can like, I live for watering someone else's flower pot,
Totally.
if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
totally.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I could talk to you forever, but I know that I can't. So I want people to know in more clarity because your nurture offer is insane. Number two, you're the goat. The way that no, like legitimately, like the way that you have navigated this industry and stayed true to yourself is such a testament because there's few and far between. And so I just want to like applaud you and shine light on who and what you're doing. So tell the good people how they can work with you and learn more about you, please.
Yeah. So our Boss Moms community is the community where all the moms who want to have businesses or have businesses connect. And that's our boss-mom.com. And you can just find our Facebook group there. Nurture to Convert Society has been around for 3 years. It's our only core program besides very limited one-on-one work that I do with sort of bigger spaces. And they are like the Nurture Convert Society. What we say is that it is specifically designed for B2C women, women who are helping other people improve their lives, because that is a very unserved market, I believe. And we help them to stop being their industry's best kept secret. These are the women that we say like to be known for their brain and not their dance moves. They want to build businesses with integrity and that feel aligned. And they also don't want to be dancing around and doing things that their kids would find embarrassing, right? They don't think they should have to. They want to have privacy while being an influencer in their space. And that's really important to them. So that's where we tap into that. And then I also, because we get a lot of business coaches and things like that come, we have a business coaching program that every once in a while I open up to come in and teach people how I would coach, how I would lead, how we would do those kinds of things. But yeah, the Nurture Convert Society it's a really beautiful place. Like our women are doing like really insanely awesome, valuable, important, really important things like
Mhm.
parents that are adopting troubled teens and how to communicate, like helping with just everything you could think of that saves marriages, grows great kids, helps us to be more emotionally sound, to love ourselves, to care, like just all of that stuff. So I love being a part of that journey for people, and it's a different kind of marketing and sales, and so we've kind of tapped into that, and that's our space. That's what we
Mm.
do.
Okay, well, if your pitch wasn't a testament to how good you are at messaging, because as you're talking, I'm like, yes, that's so good. It's as a marketer, I'm like, yes, so good. And you're right, the B2C is often very much overlooked because B2B is what where the money's at. But no, B2C, these women deserve to expand what they're doing because they're doing it in the service of others, which is like such a valiant, noble thing.
It's not even that they're untapped. It's that I think they're actually being kind of lied to, where a lot
Mm,
of people will say, no, my system could work for you. And you're
mm,
like, they are different. They are, the way you market when you're helping people make money is different than when you're helping
yes.
somebody
Yep.
lose weight or stay married or get your child to sleep.
Yeah.
They're just different ways that you should grow. So yeah, we want to be that space for, we are that space for women. We've got about 500 members so at the current moment, and they're lovely. We love them.
Yeah, and growing.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming. Thank you for being honest and vulnerable and sharing the things that you did. Thank you for the gold tactical advice that if I literally could have everybody in my program listen to this podcast as a requirement, I will. It was so good. So, and you just say it off the cuff. Like, you're a walking testimonial. You're a walking like quote factory because I experienced that in person. So thank you for imparting your wisdom on the Rainmaker community today.
Well, thanks for having me, my new friend.
Yes. Thanks for listening to the Rainmaker podcast. We believe you can't get real results or have real relationships that last without being real first. If you resonated with today's episode, leave us a review so we can keep serving up the truth and tips that help you become the empowered leader that I know that you are. And always head over to veronicarami.com to check out all the free resources I have for you and the show notes from this episode. Until next time, my friends.